Imagine a single mind, quiet, almost invisible. A person sits alone, not with others, but with an idea, and they stay with it for years. The world outside buzzes with noise. It begs for attention, for opinions, for reactions. But they simply continue their work, in silence. We are taught to believe that history is written by the loudest voices, by charismatic leaders on grand stages, by those who command the crowd. But if you open any book on the history of science, of art, of technology, you see different names, names of people who left behind few portraits, who avoided the spotlight, who chose the company of their own thoughts over any gathering. These are the quiet ones. And they are the ones who have so often changed everything. Isaac Newton, a man so reclusive he would work for months without speaking to another soul. He breathed his work, lost in a world of his own making. The world outside could wait. And from that profound solitude, he gave us the laws of motion and a new understanding of light. He laid the very foundations of classical mechanics, not by seeking applause, but by seeking truth in the quiet of his chambers. Albert Einstein, who famously called solitude a blessing for a man of my type, he found his greatest clarity not in bustling university halls, but in the quiet hours of his job as a patent clerk, a role that gave him the one thing he needed most, time to think, peacefully. It was in that unassuming office, away from the demands of academia, that he rewrote our understanding of space, time, and gravity. Nikola Tesla, a figure of almost mythical isolation. He lived a life of extreme discipline, with few friends, dedicating himself entirely to his visions. He saw worlds in his mind that no one else could comprehend. And from that lonely, brilliant mind, he gave us alternating current, the very bedrock of our modern electrical grid. He powered the future, not from a stage, but from the depths of his own singular focus. Or consider the arts. Emily Dickinson, she rarely left the confines of her family home. She shared fewer than a dozen of her poems with the world during her lifetime. She wrote for herself in the quiet corners of her house, filling notebooks with verses that were radical, private, and profound. Today, she is hailed as one of the greatest poets in the American canon. Her legacy wasn't built on public readings or literary acclaim, but on the silent, persistent work of a soul in communion with her craft. This pattern isn't a relic of the past, it continues today, often hidden in plain sight. Think of Satoshi Nakamoto, the creator of Bitcoin, a name that changed the landscape of global finance, that introduced a new paradigm of currency. And yet, the person, or people, behind the name remain a complete mystery. They gave the world a revolutionary technology, and then simply disappeared. Their quiet exit did not stop their creation from reshaping our world. Their silence was, in its own way, the most powerful statement of all. Look at the digital world we all inhabit. It was built, in large part, by quiet hands, by open-source developers working alone, often for years, driven by nothing more than a passion for solving a problem. Linus Torvalds, working in his student apartment, created the Linux kernel, a piece of software that now powers the vast majority of the internet, the world's supercomputers, and the phone in your pocket. Bram Moolenaar created the Vim text editor, a tool beloved by programmers for its efficiency, and dedicated decades to its improvement, mostly in solitude. These are not figures we see on magazine covers. They are introverts whose code, written in silent dedication, is now used by billions. And in the highest echelons of science and mathematics, this trend is even more pronounced. The Russian mathematician Grigory Perelman solved the Poincare conjecture, one of the most difficult problems in mathematics, a puzzle that had stumped the greatest minds for a century. He worked on it for years, in total isolation. When he succeeded, he refused the $1 million Fields Medal Prize. He refused all interviews. He wanted no part of the fame or the noise. The solution itself was the only reward he ever sought. Why is this? Why do the quietest people so often achieve the most profound results? It begins with deep concentration. Without the constant need for social approval or external validation, they can dedicate uninterrupted hours, days, and years to a single problem. Their minds are not fragmented by the need to perform. They can go deeper. They can follow a single thread of thought to its ultimate conclusion, a journey that the noise of the world so often interrupts for others. They possess powerful independent thinking. Less susceptible to groupthink or the pressure of popular opinion, they can question assumptions that others take for granted. They are not trying to fit in, they are trying to understand. This allows them to see flaws in existing systems, to imagine possibilities that are invisible to the crowd. While loud personalities are busy navigating social currents, quiet people are busy charting new territory, often in directions no one else is looking. They have the ability to notice details. In the silence of their work, they perceive the subtle signals, the small inconsistencies that others, in their rush and noise, simply overlook. Great discoveries are often not loud explosions, but the quiet recognition of a detail that doesn't fit. The quiet mind has the space to see that detail and the patience to understand its significance. And perhaps most importantly, their motivation is internal. They are not driven by the promise of fame, fortune, or applause. They are driven by an insatiable curiosity, a desire to solve the puzzle, to create something true, to understand the world on a more fundamental level. Their reward is not the roar of the crowd, it is the quiet, internal click when the pieces of the puzzle finally fall into place. That moment of clarity is worth more than any external prize. This isn't just a bunch of stories. It's a solid pattern backed by research. Susan Cain's groundbreaking book, Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking, has been a global bestseller for over a decade. Scientific studies reinforce this idea. The work of Anders Ericsson, who developed the 10,000-hour rule, found that top-level expertise is almost always the result of prolonged, focused, solitary practice. So if you are watching this and you feel that your voice is too quiet for this world, remember these stories. Remember the quiet rooms, the solitary desks, the minds that chose depth over volume. The world is changed not by those who shout the loudest about their grand plans, but by those who silently, day after day, do the work. Your strength is not in your volume, it is in your depth. History teaches us a clear lesson. Great changes rarely begin with a loud declaration. They begin in silence, in the quiet room of a solitary thinker. In the late-night notes of an unknown programmer. In the deep, private reflections of a person who prefers to listen, to observe, to think, rather than to speak. The future is not waiting for the next loudest voice. It is waiting for the next deep thought, and that thought might be yours.